So let's talk a little bit about rights. Now you may have noticed if you've paid attention to the last few videos, the last few videos have been on a similar theme. They're kind of like a mini course on the tension that exists between power and rights, and how oftentimes when people are talking about rights, what they're really talking about is power or privilege, which is related to power. So we're going to try to remedy that with this series of videos here. And this video is going to talk about rights. If you need to review power, go back and see the other video. I don't want to get too into the weeds here. This is going to be long enough as it is. Let's talk a little bit about rights and exactly what rights are. Bad news here, dude. You're going to have to pay attention because this is going to be a little bit more abstract than the video on power. I know. Attention is hard to give. It's hard to give in the modern world, but try to give some attention to this, because rights are not quite as clear-cut as power. As we mentioned in the last video, power is something that's measurable and observable, but what about rights? What if I were to ask you, prove to me that you have rights? How would you do that? Now, there is a valid response to this challenge, and you'll learn that in the next few seconds as we move into this video. But for now, how would you go about proving that you have rights? What? Oh, you said they're written down? They're written down somewhere? Constitution? There's a list of them? Cool. So they're written down somewhere. I don't care. The fact that rights are written down somewhere in some document somewhere gives you no greater claim to be having rights than, well, you have a claim to being in Gryffindor because Gryffindor is written down somewhere. Doesn't matter. So exactly what are rights? Well, for sociologists, rights are a social construct. Now, in these videos, I don't really like to use the hoi polloi language of sociology. I like to use terms that we can all kind of agree on. So for our purposes, rights are a story. Rights are the story that we tell as a society that define and make meaningful our status as it relates to other people, especially to systems of power within the society. Rights are the stories that we tell about the limits of how power can be exercised on individuals. This is huge. Because once upon a time, we didn't tell this story. The story that we told was the story of a king who was sovereign and could do what he wanted to his subjects. And somehow in the last 200-300 years, we started changing the story and started saying, no. The king's not sovereign. The state's not sovereign. The people are sovereign. And they have rights that you cannot trespass against. All right, well, then what is this story? If this is a story, then what is it? Well, the good news is the story is relatively simple and it's relatively short. Now, there's a lot of debate involved in it, but it was written 250 years ago by a fellow by the name of Tom Jefferson. May have heard of him. And we're all familiar with the story. We can all recite it. Here, recite it with me. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's book 1 of the Story of Rights, which of course infers that there's a book 2. Yes, there has been some caveats. We've amended this story a bit. We've renegotiated. We've challenged this story to a certain extent. So let's take a look at it. Let's take a deeper dive into this story and add some of the book 2 stuff and see where we stand as far as the story is concerned. We hold these truths to be self-evident. What does that mean? Well, that's the answer to the initial challenge. I asked you to prove you have rights. Well, the appropriate response to me asking you to prove that you have rights is no, Andosha. I don't have to prove that I have rights. They are self-evident. I don't have to prove that I have them. Somebody who makes a claim against my rights has to prove that they have a valid and legitimate claim, but I do not have to prove that I have rights. They are self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. In other words, rights are universal. We have them all in equal measure. I do not have more rights than you do. The President of the United States does not have more rights than you do. He has more power, objectively, but he does not have more rights unless we change the story to give him more rights, which I'm not recommending. Now, notice the language here. All men are created equal. Yeah, when Jefferson was writing that, that's what he meant. He meant people with boy parts. He was not talking about the people with girl parts. And he wasn't talking about the people who were owned by the people that he was talking about. All men are created equal. Everybody else was not considered a man. So we have amended this. Now notice, he doesn't say all citizens. He doesn't say all property owners. He doesn't say all members of a particular club or religion or tribe. He says all, and now we've amended it, human beings have these rights in equal measure. And why do we have those rights? They are endowed by our Creator. Notice he didn't write God. You don't have to be a member of a particular religion to have rights. We have those. We can rewrite endowed by their Creator to say we have these rights by virtue of our humanity. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all human beings have these rights by virtue of their innate humanity. Right? We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They are endowed by the virtue of their humanity with certain inalienable rights. They can't be taken away. Now, yes, you may notice we'll say, well, we take people's rights away all the time. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But they are inalienable, and then among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is not an all-inclusive list. Jefferson is saying right out, hey, you may add stuff to this later on. You're going to have to figure this out. You're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to debate. So what does it mean to have the right to live? Abortion? Healthcare? War? Poverty? All of these are influences on life and mortality, right? So what does it mean? I don't want to get into the weeds. But these are debates about the nature of this story that we talk about. And they're good debates. They're healthy debates. We should definitely have these debates. Now, if we have these rights by virtue of our humanity, and we have them in equal proportion, they're not related to power, then what does that mean? Well, that infers that rights are incorporated into our autonomy as human beings. In other words, me expressing my rights cannot trespass against your rights. If they do, then that's not having rights in equal measure. That's a privilege. My right to shake my fist ends where your face begins. My ability to exercise my rights is limited against trespassing against you exercising your rights. In other words, rights also infer a certain level of responsibility in those who have those rights. That's part of the story, and oftentimes it's a forgotten part of the story. But rights and having rights and possessing rights as a human being means that I have a concomitant responsibility to you as a human being possessing equal rights. And that's the story of rights. It's right there. Now, so long as we all agree on that particular story, that's a powerful thing in and of itself. But one of the things that we find about rights is when rights bump up against power, power wins. So the next video, I think I got some other stuff to cover, but in the next few videos, I will be talking about how to combine the two. How do we empower this story and the meaning of this story in such a way that it actually has impact in our lives, that it's actually real. And if you paid attention this long, I appreciate it. You are among the top 1%, which doesn't vouch you any more rights.